On a scorching July afternoon in 2021, the peaceful facade of the affluent neighborhood of Lake Forest, Illinois, was shattered in a way that would haunt its residents for years to come. The center of this tragedy were the Robinsons. Simon, a 47-year-old corporate lawyer with a sterling reputation for his integrity and community involvement, and his wife, Claire, a 44-year-old art gallery curator, known for her vibrant personality and magnetic charm. They had been staples of the community for over a decade, the seemingly perfect marriage that many envied. Next door lived the Bakers, Julia, a widowed journalist, and her 21-year-old son, Alex, a university junior home for the summer. The Bakers had moved in 6 years earlier, and while they kept a low profile, they were generally well regarded by their neighbors. No one could have predicted that these ordinary lives would collide in such a catastrophic way. Simon Robinson had always been driven by ambition. Born to working-class parents in upstate New York, he had climbed the social ladder through sheer determination and relentless work ethic. By his mid-30s, he had established himself as a rising star in a prominent law firm, known for his sharp mind and unwavering dedication to his clients. Claire, on the other hand, came from a different world. The daughter of a university professor and a painter, she grew up in a household that prized creativity and self-expression. She pursued a degree in art history with dreams of curating at prestigious galleries. Her path crossed with Simon's at a charity auction in 2005. Simon, already successful but lacking in social grace, was immediately drawn to Claire's elegance and warmth. For Claire, Simon represented stability and the promise of a life where she could pursue her passions without financial constraints. They married a year later in a ceremony that was the talk of their social circle. The early years of their marriage were filled with happiness. Simon's career continued to thrive, and he took pride in providing Claire with a life of comfort and luxury. Claire, in turn, immersed herself in her role as the perfect corporate wife, hosting dinner parties and attending social events critical for Simon's networking. She also began curating at a high-end gallery, finding fulfillment in promoting emerging artists. But as the years passed, cracks began to appear in their carefully constructed life. Simon's work hours grew longer as his ambition pushed him to chase ever bigger cases and clients. He was rarely home before 9 p.m., and even when he was, his mind was often elsewhere, constantly checking his phone for emails or legal updates. Approaching her mid-40s, Claire found herself increasingly restless. The gallery work that once excited her now felt empty, and she began to question the choices that had led her to this point, wondering if she had sacrificed her dreams for a life that, while luxurious, left her feeling trapped. Their inability to have children, despite years of trying, added another layer of strain to their relationship. By the summer of 2021, the Robinsons' marriage was a carefully maintained facade. To the outside world, they still appeared to be the golden couple. Simon had recently secured a high-profile case that could lead to a partnership at his firm, while Claire's gallery was thriving. Behind closed doors, they were virtual strangers. Conversations were sparse, mostly about schedules and social obligations, and physical intimacy had become a rarity, each touch laden with unspoken resentments and unmet expectation. Neither Simon nor Claire was willing to admit, even to themselves, how far they had drifted apart. It was easier to maintain the illusion of a happy marriage than to confront the emptiness that had grown between them. Little did they know that this unacknowledged chasm in their relationship was about to become the catalyst for a tragedy that would shatter not just their lives, but the entire community of Lake Forest. The Bakers had moved into the house next door to the Robinsons in 2015, following the death of Julia Baker's husband, Dr. William Baker, a respected surgeon. William had succumbed to the very illness he had dedicated his life to fighting, leaving Julia to raise their son Alex alone. Julia, a soft-spoken journalist, initially struggled to adjust to life in the new community. The move from their modest home in Milwaukee had been necessary to escape the memories that haunted every corner of their old life, but the affluent suburb felt alien to her. She found solace in her writing and tending to her garden, which soon became the envy of the neighborhood. Alex Baker was 15 when they moved in, an introverted teenager more comfortable with computers than with people. The transition to a new school was difficult, and he often found himself the target of bullies who mocked his quiet demeanor. It was during this time that Simon Robinson took Alex under his wing, offering him a job mowing lawns and doing odd jobs around the neighborhood. Over the next 6 years, Alex blossomed into a handsome young man, his natural intelligence finding an outlet in his computer science studies at the University of Illinois. Despite his growing confidence, Alex remained devoted to his mother, worried about her isolation and loneliness. He made a point of coming home most weekends, even when his friends were planning parties or road trips. It was during one of these weekend visits in early June that Alex first saw Claire Robinson in a new light. Julia had always been grateful for the Robinsons' kindness, particularly Claire's efforts to include her in neighborhood activities. She often spoke of Claire's generosity, unaware of the complex emotions brewing beneath the surface of her son's polite nods. The spark that ignited the affair between Claire Robinson and Alex Baker was as unexpected as it was intense. It happened on a warm evening in early June during one of the Robinsons' legendary summer soirees. Simon, as usual, was holding court near the grill, regaling his colleagues with tales of his latest legal victory. Claire, feeling particularly isolated amidst the crowd, retreated to the relative quiet of the pool house to replenish the ice bucket. Alex, who had been reluctantly dragged to the party by his mother, chose that moment to seek refuge from the noise and forced socializing. He entered the pool house, not realizing it was occupied, and found Claire struggling with a large bag of ice. Their eyes met, and in that instant, something shifted. He moved to help her with the ice, their hands brushing together. They stood there, momentarily frozen, the cold of the ice contrasting sharply with the heat building between them. It was Claire who broke the silence, her voice low as she thanked him. Alex, usually so articulate, found himself stammering in response. That brief encounter set the stage for what was to come. Over the next few weeks, Claire and Alex found themselves manufacturing reasons to be in each other's company. It started innocently enough. Claire asking Alex for help with her laptop, Alex offering to assist in her garden. Each interaction was charged with an undercurrent of attraction that they both tried to ignore. Their first kiss happened almost a month after the soiree. Alex had been helping Claire set up for an outdoor art event she was hosting. As they finished, a sudden summer storm broke out. They ran for shelter under a nearby gazebo, laughing and breathless as the rain poured down around them. Claire looked at Alex and felt a surge of desire she hadn't experienced in years. Before she could think better of it, she leaned in and kissed him. From that point on, their affair escalated quickly. They were reckless, driven by a combination of Alex's youthful passion and Claire's desperation to feel alive again. They met in secluded spots around town, in the back row of the local cinema, in a hidden corner of the public library, and most dangerously, in the Robinson home when Simon was at work. Each encounter left them craving more, the gulf in their ages forgotten in the heat of their stolen moments. Claire felt rejuvenated, rediscovering parts of herself she thought long lost. Alex, for his part, was intoxicated by Claire's experience and the taboo nature of their relationship. But as the summer wore on, the strain of maintaining their secret began to show. Close calls became more frequent, a neighbor almost catching them in an embrace, a suspicious glance from Julia when Claire's name came up too often in conversation. The guilt, too, started to weigh on them both. Alex struggled with the knowledge that he was betraying Simon, a man who had been nothing but kind to him. Claire found herself lying more and more to her husband. Each deception, another crack in the foundation of her marriage. Yet despite the risks and the guilt, neither seemed able to end the affair. They were caught in a whirlwind of passion and need, blind to the devastating consequences that loomed on the horizon. July 20th, 2021, dawned hot and humid, the air heavy with the promise of an approaching storm. It was a Monday, and Lake Forest stirred to life as its residents prepared for another week of work and routine. For Simon Robinson, it began like any other day. He rose early, donned one of his impeccably tailored suits, and left for the office before Claire had even stirred from sleep. Claire woke later, her mind already racing with plans for the day ahead. Simon had informed her the night before that he would be working late, a crucial client dinner that could seal his partnership deal. For Claire, this meant an opportunity. She sent a text to Alex, her heart racing as she suggested he come over in the afternoon. Alex, who had been agonizing over the affair for days, saw the message as a chance to end things face to face. He replied with a simple, "Okay," resolving to break it off, for the situation spiraled further out of control. The day passed slowly for both of them. Claire went through the motions of her morning, her usual poise replaced by a nervous energy that her colleagues couldn't help but notice. Alex, at his summer internship, found it hard to focus on his tasks, his mind constantly drifting to thoughts of Claire and the conversation to come. At 3 p.m., Alex made his way next door, glancing furtively around to ensure none of the neighbors were watching. Claire ushered him in quickly, her face flushed with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. It was Alex who broke the silence. starting to say that they needed to talk. Claire, misreading his intention and driven by a desperate need to feel desired, cut him off with a passionate kiss. Despite his reservations, Alex found himself responding, his resolve weakening in the face of Claire's intensity. What happened next was a blur of discarded clothes and tangled limbs as they made their way to the master bedroom. All thoughts of ending the affair were temporarily forgotten as they lost themselves in each other. Hey crime case solvers! Interested in more real-life murder mysteries? Be sure to like and subscribe to our channel, and if you have any thoughts about this case or have a case of your own you would like us to investigate, leave us a comment. Stay safe, crime case solvers. Meanwhile, across town, Simon Robinson sat in his office, frowning at his computer screen. The numbers for the client presentation weren't adding up, and he knew he'd have to redo a significant portion of his work. Frustration mounting, he made a snap decision. He would go home, regroup, and return to the office later, finish up before the dinner. 4:15 p.m., Simon's car pulled into the driveway. He noticed Alex Baker's beat-up Honda parked a little way down the street, but thought nothing of it, assuming Alex was helping his mother with something. He unlocked the front door and entered the house, but something felt off. A half-empty glass of wine sat on the kitchen counter, unusual for Claire at this hour. Then he heard it, a muffled sound coming from upstairs. Frowning, he climbed the stairs, the noise growing louder as he approached the master bedroom. What Simon saw when he opened the door would be forever seared into his memory. His wife, the woman he had loved for 16 years, was in their bed with Alex Baker, the young man he had mentored and trusted. The roar of rage and pain, Simon lunged forward, his hands, so used to holding legal documents and shaking on business deals, now curled into fists as he grabbed Alex, yanking him off the bed. Claire screamed, scrambling to cover herself and separate the two men, but her efforts were in vain. Simon's first punch caught Alex squarely in the jaw, sending the younger man stumbling backward. Driven by adrenaline and fear, Alex fought back. The two men grappled, crashing into the dresser, sending framed photos and trinkets scattering across the floor. In the chaos, no one noticed the heavy brass lamp that had fallen from the nightstand. No one saw it until Simon, in a fit of blind rage, grabbed it and brought it down on Alex's head, a sickening thud. The sound seemed to echo in the sudden silence that followed. Alex crumpled to the floor, blood pooling rapidly around his motionless form. Claire's scream pierced the air as the full horror of what had just transpired hit them all. As storm clouds gathered outside, and sirens wailed in the distance, the lives of everyone involved changed irrevocably. The idyllic facade of Lake Forest had been shattered, and nothing would ever be the same again. Piercing wail of police sirens shattered the usual tranquility of the community. Neighbors peered out from behind curtains, curiosity mingling with apprehension as squad cars and an ambulance screeched to a halt in front of the Robinson residence. The first officers on the scene were met with a tableau of horror that would haunt them for years to come. Inside, they found a shell-shocked Simon Robinson, his hands covered in blood, sitting on the edge of the bed, his head in his hand. Claire, barely clothed and hysterical, was in the corner of the room. The room bore all the marks of a violent struggle: overturned furniture, shattered glass, and smears of blood on the hardwood floor. Detective Maria Espinoza, a veteran of the police department's homicide unit, took charge of the scene. Her first priority was securing medical attention for Alex Baker. As paramedics worked feverishly to stabilize him, Espinoza began the delicate process of piecing together the events that had led to this tragedy. Simon, still in a state of shock, was taken into custody without resistance. Claire was separately questioned, her stories fragmented and emotional, painting a picture of a long-simmering marital discord that had exploded into violence. As word spread through the neighborhood, a crowd began to gather at the police cordon. Among them was Julia Baker, who collapsed in grief when informed of her son's critical condition. She was quickly whisked away to the hospital, where Alex was fighting for his life in the intensive care unit. The investigation moved quickly. Forensics teams combed through the Robinson home, collecting evidence and taking photographs. Brass lamp, now a potential murder weapon, was carefully bagged and tagged. Neighbors were interviewed, their statements adding context to the relationships between the Robinsons and the Bakers. One neighbor recalled hearing raised voices from the Robinson house earlier that afternoon, but had dismissed it as the television playing too loudly. Another mentioned seeing Alex enter the Robinson home around 3 p.m., noting it because he thought it odd given Simon's usual work schedule. As night fell, the gravity of the situation became clear. Alex Baker was pronounced dead at 10:12 p.m., never having regained consciousness. The charge against Simon Robinson was elevated from assault to second-degree murder. In the days that followed, more details emerged. Claire, racked with guilt and facing intense scrutiny, admitted to the affair with Alex. Her statement, given through tears at the police station, provided a timeline of their relationship and the events leading up to that fateful afternoon. Simon, advised by his hastily retained attorney, remained silent, but his colleagues at the law firm painted a picture of a man under immense pressure, working long hours in pursuit of a partnership that had seemed within reach. None, however, had suspected the depth of his marital problems or the capacity for violence that had been unleashed. The case against Simon Robinson was building, but Espinosa knew that in the court of public opinion, there would be no clear villains or heroes in this story, only victims, each in their own way, of the secrets and lies that had finally come to light in the most devastating manner possible. But no one could have anticipated the shocking twist that was about to unfold. The Robinson trial began on a crisp autumn morning, 6 months after the events that had shaken Lake Forest to its core. County Courthouse, a stately building of red brick and white columns, was surrounded by reporters and curious onlookers. Inside, the tension was palpable as the judge called the court to order. Prosecuting attorney Rachel Monroe, known for her sharp mind and even sharper tongue, laid out the state's case in her opening statement. She painted a vivid picture of Simon Robinson as a man consumed by rage and jealousy who had brutally murdered a young man in the prime of his life. Monroe's words were measured but impactful, her gaze sweeping across the jury as she promised to prove Simon's guilt beyond any reasonable doubt. Defense attorney Michael Grant countered with a narrative of his own. He portrayed Simon as a devoted husband and pillar of the community, pushed to the brink by a betrayal of the deepest kind. Grant suggested that the death was a tragic accident, the result of a confrontation that had spiraled out of control. As the trial progressed, a parade of witnesses took the stand. Forensic experts testified about blood spatter patterns and the force required to cause Alex's fatal injury. Neighbors recounted the events of that day, and character witnesses spoke to the personalities and reputations of both Simon and Alex. But it was Claire Robinson's testimony that captivated the courtroom. Over 2 grueling days on the stand, she laid bare the disintegration of her marriage and the evolution of her relationship with Alex. Her voice trembled as she described the moment Simon had walked in on them and the horror of watching the confrontation unfold. Under cross-examination, Grant tried to paint her as an unfaithful wife whose actions had driven her husband to temporary insanity, but Claire held firm, accepting her part in the tragedy while insisting that nothing justified Alex's death. Julia Baker's testimony was brief but powerful. Still grief-stricken, she spoke of her son's kindness and his dreams for the future, all cut short in an act of violence. Her quiet dignity in the face of unimaginable loss moved many in the courtroom to tears. As the trial neared its end, all eyes turned to Simon Robinson. Against his lawyer's advice, he chose to take the stand. His testimony was a study in contrast, moments of apparent remorse interspersed with flashes of the anger that had led to Alex's death. He spoke of the pressure he'd been under at work, growing distance in his marriage, and the shock of discovering his wife's infidelity. When describing the fight with Alex, Simon claimed he had never intended to cause serious harm, that he had simply lost control. Expert witnesses from the field of psychology were called to provide insight into the minds of those involved in the tragic event. Dr. Elaine Mitchell explained that Simon's actions could be understood through the lens of what psychologists call intermittent explosive disorder, characterized by episodes of violent aggressive behavior, disproportionate to the situation. She pointed to Simon's high-stress job, his unexpressed marital dissatisfaction, and the shock of discovering his wife's infidelity as contributing factors to his violent outburst. However, under cross-examination, Dr. Mitchell conceded that while these factors could explain Simon's behavior, they did not excuse it. She emphasized that many individuals faced similar stressors without resorting to violence. The defense called a specialist in marriage and family therapy to testify about the psychological impact of infidelity. Dr. Robert Hartman described the profound sense of betrayal and loss of identity that a person may experience upon discovering a spouse's affair, likening it to a form of psychological trauma capable of triggering extreme emotional responses. The psychological analyses presented during the trial offered a complex picture of human behavior and motivation, highlighting how a combination of personal history, Societal expectations and immediate circumstances can collide to create a perfect storm of tragedy. After 7 grueling weeks of testimony, evidence presentation, and legal arguments, the fate of Simon Robinson rested in the hands of the jury. As Judge Blackwell sent the 12 men and women to deliberate, tense silence fell over the courtroom. After a short recess to consider all factors, Judge Blackwell returned to deliver her sentence. Citing the violent nature of the crime, balanced against Simon's lack of prior criminal history, and the unique circumstances of the case, she sentenced him to 18 years in state prison, the possibility of parole after 12 years. As Simon was led away in handcuffs, the full weight of the tragedy seemed to descend upon the courtroom. There were no victors here, only lives irrevocably altered by a moment of passion and a split second of violence. Outside, as news of the verdict spread, the crowd's reactions were mixed. Some felt justice had been served, while others argued the sentence was too harsh, too lenient. But all agreed on one thing. The events that had unfolded in Lake Forest would leave an indelible mark on the community for years to come.